Okay, excited to get started. Fine. Apologize, I've been under the weather all week, so I hope my voice doesn't give out. I have something to drink here to hopefully keep me going. Okay. So the Mishnah says, we all in? I'll ask everybody if you mind muting yourselves. Everybody please mute yourselves unless you have a question or something. Try to get a full view here if I can. Okay. All right. So the Mishnah says we have a lot to cover here. We'll see what we can do. There's this, as you've seen, I'm sure this is one of the biggest sugyas around. It's really a shas sugya. So we're touching on it to a certain extent, but we'll hopefully cover as much as we can in this amazing sugya. So the Mishnah says, psachim, so Acha Techshach, Tosis asks, Machshina Namai Istrich Acha Techshach, Shita. Though the Gemara Gabi Shabbos Yom Tovim Lok Tanila, we don't find such a Mishnah by Shabbos Yom Tovim. You can't eat until Techshach. Omar Rimi Korbil Gabi Matzah Dafka Be'inin Acha Techshach. It's a special din by matzah that you need Acha Techshach. Kedetani B'Tesefta Pesach Matzah Morer Mitzvasa Misha Techshach. There's a special din in Korban Pesach that has to be eaten dafka balayla. But matzah mor is kashul Pesach. There's a hekesh between matzah mor and Pesach, which tells us that matzah mor also have to be balayla like Korban Pesach. Avasuda Shabbos Yom Tovim matzah achol lehu mi'b'od yom. But Suda Shabbos and Yom Tov, your Kabul Shabbos and Yom Tov, you can eat it in Yibod Yom. Gerama Perak Tfilas HaShachar, brings a right from Gemara and Brachos, and follow Adam Shal Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, Omer Kiddush Hayom, Yibod Yom. Now, even though the Gemara does not mention anything about Sudas Shabbos or Yom Tov in that Gemara and Brachos, it just assumes, and the some Rishonim speak out Lahedya, or at least it's a discussion over there in Brachos, that since there's a din of Kiddush and Makom Suda, so you can only be Yotze Kiddush if you have the Suda with it. So it's just assumed. People try to get in. Then it's assumed that we're eating a Sudas Shabbos or Yom Tov. Otherwise, you're not going to be Yotze your Chiyuv of Kiddush as well. So if it says it's a back and forth in the Gemara, I'm sure everybody saw the Gemara in Brachos. Just as a side, that if we're really trying to ever understand a Tosas and the Tosas quotes a Gemara, then it's a given that we look up that Gemara, because first of all, then you understand the context of Tosas. And number two, you also might find important leads in Rashi or Tosas or the Rishonim in that particular sugya, which we will, as we see as we go along in that Gemara and Brachos. But the Gemara had a back and forth over there that when it says that Mispal Adam to Shabbos for Shabbos, Tosas is bringing the Maskana here, but it was really a shiloh in the Gemara and Brachos whether you also make Kiddush or not. And the Maskana's Gemara is you make Kiddush, but Tosas is bringing here the Maskana, and the next step after that is making an assumption after the maskana that you make kiddush that obviously you're eating a suda as well. Otherwise, you're not going to be yotze kiddush mokum suda. So it comes out that really be'etzem matzah should have also be like suda Shabbos Yom Tov according to Tosfos, except for the fact that there is a special drasha that tells us that matzah has to be, because of the hekesh to Korban Pesach, has to be balayla dafka. And at the end of Tosfos, that's the shita of the Rima Korbil. At the end of Tosfos, he says, Rabbeinu Yehuda teretz, afilu be'inan gabe Shabbos Yom Tovim Acha Techshach. Maybe, perhaps you do need Acha Techshach by Shabbos Yom Tov. You can't eat the Suda Shabbos Yom Tov. What do you do with that Gemara and Brachos? It's a kasha, it's a question, but halcha itzrich lemisnei dasal hashminan. Davagat the shchitas psachim mib'od yom eno nechal mib'od yom shar kachim. Chen yesh b'Yerushalmi v'reish pirkin tani erev Shabbos min mincha l'mayla l'yitum klum achet techshach. There is a sheet of the Yerushalmi that also on erev Shabbos you can't eat anything, and achet techshach meaning you can't eat the suda until it's choshech mamish. And the only reason that we might have thought it's different we need a mission over here to tell us this is because they might have thought mistakenly that since you can be making the korban pesach on erev pesach, you can also eat it on erev pesach and as well the matzah and mar as well. Kamash Milan that the korban pesach and everything, even though the shechita is the only exception in Gans Kachim that you have the shechita on one day and the achila on a different day, meaning that night. To tell us that exception, you might have thought that the achila was line shechita. Kamash Milan, it has to be mishtachshach the following day. It's already Vadai night. So it comes out that there's at least at Tzad over here in the according to Rabbeinu Yehuda, not like the Rima Korbil. The Rima Korbil takes on as Davar Pashat that Suda Shabbos and Yom Tov can be eaten even beyond much of Makabel Shabbos, just like you can daven and you can make Kiddush. You can also eat the Suda Shabbos. And there's a Tzad over here in Rabbeinu Yehuda that's not so, that you need also by Suda Shabbos, you need Vadai Laila. So you have to understand what's the Nekudas and Machlokas, these two Bali Atosas over here. What's the Nekudas that Mecholak on? So first we have to go a little bit into the whole concept of Tosefes Shabbos and Yom Tov a little more deeply. So the this halacha over here that the Rima Korbil holds that you can eat the Suda during the day. I mean, during the day once you're Makabel Shabbos. The rush in Brachos in Siman Vav, we had that in the Mar Makomos. So the rush over here learns that it's built in near of Avagav the Sir like a Yehuda in Tfilas Erev, Shishara via Kodem Alaylo, the Tosefes Yom Kippurim Yomtev the Kaimelon Shemin Torah, Pir Kamen Rosh Hashanah, Ansar Kokach Shiur Gadol. Okay, so he says that the Rush tells us a couple of chedushim. Number one, he wants to say that he takes on as a Deborah Pashat the Kabbalah Shabbos and Yom Tov before, that's a din deraisa. He says like the Stemus of Gemara and Rosh Hashanah Daf Tes. Take a look over there. That's the Pashas of Gemara in Daf Tes and Rosh Hashanah. It was actually just a few days ago in Daf Yomi. The Gemara has a brisa over there that it's all based on psukim in the Torah. There's a brisa that says "Nisim es nafshasechem b'tisha." You have to do inui nefesh on Yom Kippur on Tisha. Yochel b'tisha tamid lomar be'erev. Iba erev yochel mishtachshach. Tamid lomar b'tisha haketzad maschil nis'anim v'od yom. So it tells us a mitzvah of Tosefes Yom Kippurim that the inu Yom Kippur has to start b'od yom, not before the Laila starts. Haketzad maschil nis'anim v'od yom. So from here, we learned a din deraisa from a pasuk in the Yikra that tells us there's a din mosifim mechol kodesh gabi Yom Kippur. In the Knisasa b'tzias minayin tamalom erev ad erev. So there's also a din Tosefes afterwards. In the Yom Kippurim shabbosos minayin. How do you know Shabbos is also a din b'mosif mechol ala kodesh? Tamalomer Tishbasu, because it says in the same pasuk Tishbasu to include also Shabbos. Yom Tovim Minayin. What about Yom Tov? Tamalomer Shabbatchem. So we already know Shabbos, so what do you need Shabbatchem? That's Moisif also Yom Tovim. HaKetzad. So what's the cloud that comes out of this? Kol Makom Sheyesh Bo Shvus. Any time there's a din Shvus, which would be Shabbos, Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, Mosifim Nechol Ala Kodesh. We see Rabbi Akiva as cholik, and we'll maybe talk more about Rabbi Akiva afterwards. But this is the Iker Drasha that the Rosh is referring to, which the Pashtas Dvarim is that it's a Drasha Deraisa. And Tosas in a few places also learns that it's a Drasha Gemura Midaraisa. And the Rosh as well that we're quoting, the Rosh says that it's a Deraisa. The Rosh interestingly says that the Yisod of this din. It's not clear from anywhere in Shas exactly how long this Zman Tosefes is. How long could one be Mosif? We know that it can't be before Plaga Mincha because that's Mamish Friday. So, but once it's Plag Mincha, is it already from that time on, or is it later on? So the Rush learns that it's built on the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So Machlokes Tanaim, Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can already daven Marav from Plag Mincha, and we actually paskin that way that if a person wants to, they could daven Mincha from Plag Mincha, Marav from Plag Mincha. I once had I was leaving the Mir Yeshiva. I had to leave early and go on back to Baifagan, so I wanted to daven Marav on the way. It was in the winter, so I waited till went into Satmar, and I said, "What are you waiting for?" They were sitting and waiting. So they said, "We're waiting for Rabbeinu Tam." I said, "Okay, I'll wait for a few more minutes, like 3 minutes for Rabbeinu Tam." We hit Rabbeinu Tam, then they said, "Asher Sheve Sacha." That's a different shita. That's so I didn't quite make more over there. Anyway, but the Rosh is learning that the Shita Rabbi Yehuda is really the Yesod of the Din Tosefes Deraisa, that since there's a Tzad of Laila, which we paskin Davi Kamar Avid, Davi Kamar Avid, Moran Bracha says that you can daven, if you daven Mara before, then you have to repeat Kriyash Ma later on, because Kriyash Ma means Laila, but Tzad Mara, there's a Tzad Laila already from Plag Mincha. There's such a Tzad. So the Rosh holds that Tzad of Laila of Rabbi Yehuda that starts with Plag Mincha, on that is built the din of Tosefes, that one's Makabal on themselves, Tosefes Shabbos Yom Tov from Plag Mincha, then it's already Chal, and not only Chal, but it's Chal Midiraisa, it's Nichlal in that drasha of the Gemara Rosh Hashanah that you can mostly Nichol al Kodesh from the time that already has a Mikzas Laila into it, which is Plag Mincha on. That's what the Rosh is saying. Again, he says the Kaimelon Shumina Torah that it's a din deraisa per Kamen de Rosh Hashanah. He says Ein Tzarach Kol Kach Shiur Gadol. You don't have to add that much for the Tosefes. You're not mechuyev to add to Mekan that deraisa to add the entire time of Plag Mincha. Miu Nirash Tzarach Shiur, but he says there does need to be a Shiur. He brings a raya from the Gemara and Beitzav and Shabbos that holds that it's deraisa, and even so, it talks about the women that are eating and drinking on Erev Yom Kippur, and they're not Makayim that din deraisa, where there's a mitzvah of Tachacha. So he says for sure they weren't eating until the very, very last second. They're eating sometime before that, and even so, it says that I'm Makayim the mitzvah of Tosefes. So you see that there is a shear to Tosefes, just not so clear what that shear is. You're not mechuyev to go all the way to Plag Mincha. You have to be Mosif, and you're Mosif, you're Makayim din deraisa, and it's not clear what that shear is. That's what the Rush says. Balkopanim, it comes out from the Rush though that whatever you are Mosif, at least from Plag Mincha on, whatever you are Mosif, that becomes Tosefes. Whatever the shear of Chiyuv is, we're not sure, but it's Pashas, whatever you are Mosif, even past the shear HaMechuyev, you go all the way back to Plag Mincha, that's also Nichlal in the mitzvah of Tosefes all the way back to Plag Mincha. We select that for Rabbeinu Yonah also. Rabbeinu Yonah there in Brachos. The way he brings a mashal in the name of Yaakov Merlinus, he says, "Ava pisha Tosefes Shabbos dai b'kolshehu." Your yotzei, even with a kolshehu, with a little amount, afilu hachi im umosif harbe yoser b'chal Tosefes tabi b'chayav Allah. So it's whatever you are Mosif, at least he doesn't talk about Plag Mincha, but Pasha, that's what he means. Whatever you are Mosif, then it's B'chlal Tosefes, and he says interesting words, V'chayav aleh. Chayav alav. Those words are strange because the Pashtus is that even your Mekayim the mitzvah deraisa Tosefes, I comment as a deraisa, it's only an asay deraisa, not a lav deraisa. It's not B'chal the skila of Shabbos or Yom Tov, or the lav, or the chorus of Yom Tov. It's only the asay. The only thing that you're mosif onto is on the asay of Tishbos, because every Shabbos has within the lav of Los Asakom Malacha. We have the lavin of Shabbos, and we have the asay of Tishbos, Tivishoves, which is mitzvah asay. So for sure, we're not. If you're mosif Michal Kodesh, you're not mosif the etzem gufo shel Shabbos mamish. The akadekach that you would get skila with Adam and everything like that. It's not. It doesn't nichal in the lab. It's and all the poskim point this out. All your mosif is the asay of Tishbos. So the words of chayav alav is strange in their ben Yonah. but maybe he's madgish the fact that it's considered really, it's considered a Tosefes. It's really a full Tosefes Deraisa. Avapish Efshar Lomar She'enu Elamid Rabban. So he has a suffix about it. Here the Ben Yonah does have a suffix. Perhaps Tosefes is only din Rabbanan. He doesn't go into that at all. In other words, the Pashtus, according to Ben Yonah, is that Tosefes is Deraisa. Because it's sad, perhaps it's a Rabban. We'll speak more about that. I feel also last Shum Davar Tosefes Kolshu. But whatever you are mosif, whether it's Deraisa or Rabbanan, you can't do any malacha whatsoever like that Kolshu, which that's clearly Deraisa, that Kolshu that's right before that everybody agrees they have to be mosif. That's clearly Deraisa, and there's an Isser malacha on that. So whatever your mosif is nichlal on that. And he makes a comparison to the Mishnah in Trumas, that even though Chita Achas Pateres Kol Akri, you could have a whole silo of wheat. In Midaraisa, your B'diavad, your Yotzai, Hafrashas Truma, taking off one wheat kernel. But even so, that's not the proper midah. They have different midos, depending who it is. But whatever it is, you do take off, and you say Harizet Truma. Whether you take off one kernel, or you take off a pound of wheat, it's Chal the Din Truma Midaraisa on the entire amount that you take off. So even though you went beyond the minimum, but it expands to the entire amount that you took off. So who it did, the bare minimum is kolshehu of Tosefes, which is a little bit not like the Rush. The Rush holds boy shear. The Rush holds that the minimum is not a kolshehu. The Rush holds the minimum is something bigger than that, even though it's not clear what it is. But nevertheless, they both agree that whatever you do add to it becomes a full din Tosefes and pashas midaraisa, perhaps Rabbanan, but pashas midaraisa, that you went beyond, but that became a din Tosefes. So that's just a fascinating thing he says here. That we'll say that what comes out from the Ben Yonah is that what you are mosif is there's a chalos Shabbos Yom Tov on that Tosefes. It's chal, even to the point that he says the words chayav olav. There's a chalos Shabbos in Yom Tov in that. So just on the side, just to flush out this point to Rabbi Yonah, that he does mention it's sad that it's Rabbanan. There is actually a shita of the Mordechai in Megillah, the name of Rabbi Tam, that holds that Tosefes is only in Rabbanan. However, the Rush, like we saw, Tosas in many places, and a very long list of Rishonim. The Orcha Shulchan brings a long list of Goinim and Rishonim, all that hold that Tosefes is a din deraisa. And the Magen Ram and other in the Achronim and the Bir Lacha as well, and Reish Samach Aleph. Sorry, it's been a rough week. The Bir Lacha Paskins, like Rov Rishonim and Achronim, the whole that Tosefes is a din deraisa. Kiveger and many Achronim all speak this out, that it's a din deraisa. So that's, even though the tzad that is Rabbanan, that halacha l'maisa we hold it as a deraisa. So now the
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
Yes.
If the whole Bein Hashmashos is in theory a suffix Shabbos, and in here we're saying it's a suffix whether it's derais or derabanan. Like, is there any is there any leeway, because we don't even know really it's a suffix when Shabbos even starts? So Tosefes Shabbos might be the whole Bein Hashmashos to begin with. Is what I'm asking. In terms of the Kol Shehu right before that, we say everyone says it's Doraisa, but it's a suffix whether that's even the start of Shabbos to begin with.
Maybe you explain again. I'm not sure if I follow the question.
It seems that for all the Deos, the Kol Shehu right before Shabbos is pasha that it's Doraisa. But is it how could it be pasha that it's Doraisa if it's not even pasha when Shabbos starts? Because Shabbos could start at Seisa Kochavim, and so Bein Hashmashos is anyways a suffix Shabbos. Okay,
everybody got the question? Good question. So the answer is, like we pointed out before, is that the din Tosefes, which is going to be the Doraisa, is copy of the Asay of Tishbos. that you could add on to it becomes a mitzvah to be shoves on Shabbos even before. What the suffix is in Benish Moshes is if it's really Shabbos or not, klapi the Isra Skila, klapi Isra Chil Shabbos, mamish. Klapi the Lavin of Shabbos. So it's two separate, we're dealing with two separate things over here. Nobody's going to say, except for that strange Lashon Rabbeinu Yonah, but it has to be Lav Dafka, but everybody points out that it's clear that you can't be Mosif onto the Skila of Shabbos. You can't be Tosefes, even if it's Deraisa, it's on the essay of Shabbos. But how we magdir that essay, we're going to go more into as we go along.
Isn't our Tosos Shabbos anyways before Benish Mashos?
Yes, it's going to be before Benish Mashos. Well, I mean, that's a whole separate sugya, which we learned that in a previous cohort 2 times ago, that in the sugya of Benish Mashos. But it's all going to, halacha l'maisa, we'll just make it simple. Halacha l'maisa, it's all going to be before what we call Benish Mashos. Yes, so before that. There is a shita of the Ritva that also said the Ritva it's in, I think right there, the Ritva in Brachos and Chavzayim. So the Ritva there speaks out. He wants to say that the Chiyuv Deraisa is from the time of Benish Mashos. It's only from the time of Benish Mashos, which is an obvious kasha. What do you need a din tosef? It's already Benish Mashos. So the Magia there in the Ritva points out that the Ritva holds like his Rebbe, the Ra'ah. The Ra'ah is the Baal Hashita that holds that Benish Mashos really starts 18 minutes before what we call Benish Mashos. That's why, because of that Shita, that's why most places light 18 minutes before to be Yotzei that Shita as well, to be Yotzei the Tosefes, even according to the Ra'ah. So the Ritva holds that it becomes Deraisa from that point on already. It's still, you can still see the sun, but it already has a Din Benish Mashos according to the Ra'ah 18 minutes before. But besides that Shita, the Ritva, then in Brachos, otherwise we say, the Tosefes has to be before. We have a suffix, which is always going to be before Benish Mashos. By the Hasidim, those who really hold like a Ben Tam, Maker a Din, so the Benish Mashos is going to be much, much later, and Tosefes would be after what we call Shkia. That would be according to Ben Tam, but we're not knowing that way, and even most Hasidim today are not knowing that way. And back in the day, you would find Hasidim that would actually still drive after Shkia, because by then it's still daylight, according to Ben Tam. They held that Maker a Din. Mishnah Ruach screams against that, because in Europe, some people are doing that.
Rebbe, real quick, would the same separation between the Lavim and the Mitzvah Saseh apply at the end of Shabbos if it's extended? No,
because yes and no, meaning that the skila, once Shabbos is over, it's over, but the din to set, there is a din to be mostly in the Chol al Kodesh, so then all your bimosif would be on the Chelik Aseh.
Past Benish Mashos after Shabbos. There's no longer
after Shabbos it wouldn't be past Benish Mashos, it would be past Tzitz B'Chavim.
Past Tzitz, right?
Right, because Benish Mashos would still be full Shabbos.
So it's the same separation then, that there's no Isser Skila.
Right, yeah. When Shabbos is over, it's over in Mitzvah Skila. Yeah, we can never add to the Skila.
But you still have a Mitzvah Saseh not to do Malacha till after.
To whatever extent you're mostly. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Is it a given that the only thing that we're being most of is tishbos? Like why, or is that like a separate sugya? Like why is that? If there's a mitzvah of tishbos, maybe it has the whole bit of Shabbos. Right? One of the Marmakomos I thought said that.
Well, that's just what the Rishonim say. They're trying to point out that if the Torah itself tells us there's a mitzvah deraisa to be most of Mechol al Kodesh, so then what can be most in? We know it can't be, and it's not Gufo Shel Shabbos Mamish to the extent that we know that that's not Itzimul Shel Yom, as we'll say. So the Achronim all point out that it's going to be if the Torah itself says that to be Mosif, it's going to be in the Tishbos.
Is that Pashut?
In the Aseh, that's possible.
Is it a Pashut Svara, or it's because I mean, I feel like we can argue that maybe there's a mitzvah of Tishbos so that you keep all of the lavin and all of the everything, all the same Kedushas Shabbos.
Yeah. So in what area is there mitzvah to be Mosif? That would be the challenge. Well, hold your question. It's going to really. Your question is a good question. It's going to depend on what we're going to say now, on how you look at the whole Din Tosefta. So, thank you for that preface.
My pleasure. Glad to be helpful.
Yeah, the checks in the mail. Okay, so in order to understand the Nekudas Machlokas Rishonim over here, which we have two studim in Tosas, and let's say going back to our Tosas, whether or not you could Yotzei Suda Shabbos during Zman Tosefes or not, and this is actually, I mean, we look more at it if you look at the Rashba and Brachos over there. The Rashba says that you can do Kiddush like the Gemara says on Tosefes, and it says the Kiddush helps in order to eat the Suda Balayla, to eat Balayla. So what happened by eating right away? The Pashas, like the Rush says, you can eat right away. So perhaps the Rush holds that the Suda really can't be Balaylas. What about Kiddush Makom Suda? So it could be that the Rashba holds, and there's a shita like this brought in the Magen Avram of the Sefer Chasidim, we'll talk about later, that that you have to eat a kazayas, or at least finish the Suda and eat a kazayas at night, mamish, because there's Gimel Sudas have to be mamish, but during Gufo Shel Shabbos, you can't eat it during Tosefes. The Taz is Cholik. The Taz in Reish Sadi Aleph, and then Reish Sadi Aleph brings that Sefer Chasidim and says it's not true. He disagrees. Marshal also was machmir, you can't, and he disagrees. You could eat it during the day once you're makabel. So we see two different worlds of poskim going over here. How do you understand this machlokas of poskim? What's happening here? So I think we have to clear a basic hakira to understand, to delve a little deeper in what is this din of Seven Shabbos. Is it shot that the Torah gave, when the Torah said to be Moshe Mechol HaKodesh, the Torah gave every person a koach to be mamshich, to stretch out the Kedusha of Shabbos onto themselves, that Kedusha of Shabbos starts here, but I can be, if I'm Kabul over here, I can stretch the Kedusha of Shabbos, maybe mikoach the Asay of Tishbos, whatever, but I can stretch the Kedusha of Shabbos to an earlier time. So it's so be'etzem I'm extending Shabbos. It gives us a koach to extend Shabbos to an earlier time. Or as a shot that no, the Shabbos is Shabbos. I can't extend Shabbos. Just like, similar to what the Gemara says, why we say Mekadosh Yisrael v'Azmanim, because we create the Zmanim, so you need Yisrael v'Azmanim. But Shabbos, we just say Mekadosh Shabbos. We don't have any hand in Shabbos. Shabbos is Kima v'Kaima. We can't extend. We can't play with Shabbos. Shabbos is what it is. So then what's shot in Kabbalah Shabbos? And so I'm not extending the Kedusha of Shabbos. It's like a Kabbalah, like a neder, like a Kabbalah on the Gavra. It's a din not on the Chefza Shel Shabbos. I'm extending it. It's a din on the Gavra, on the person that I become the Kabbalah on myself. Chiyuv Shabbos, Isurim of Shabbos. That's a shot into Tosefes Shabbos. These are two possible ways to look at Kabbalah Shabbos. So I think that we see from the Lashon of the Rebbeinu Yonah, for example, we see clearly that the comparison to Chita Achas, Poteris' Kol Akri, that you could have a minimum Tosefes, but then the more you add, it all becomes B'chlal. It sounds like he's talking about the Kedusha of Shabbos is Nimshach. It all becomes like whatever you take off becomes Truma. So whatever you're Mosif becomes Shabbos. It's not Muchach from them, but that's the way the words sound to me. They're Rebbeinu Yonah. We'll see more, but the other side of the coin, we gave out the lashon of the lavush, one of the early achronim, one of the early enforcement of the Shulchan Aruch, the lavush and Reish Sama Gimel, that he brought in the name of his Rebbe, that if somebody is, there's a din that if you're makabel on yourself, makabel Shabbos before nightfall, Makabel Shabbos early, you're allowed to tell another Yisrael to do malacha. And if he does it, then you're allowed to be nana from that malacha. That's halacha in Shulchan Aruch and Reish Sama Gimel. That's a discussion in its own right to go into. It's very. I'll just throw out that this is very negea to also to a big shaila that I discussed in my Sefer Yom Tov Sheni about a ben chutz la'aretz, let's say in Eretz Yisrael, when it's Yom Tov Sheni, to ask a ben Eretz Yisrael to do malacha for him, if that's all right or not. So it goes back to this shaila in Reish Sama Gimel, that for him it's not Yom Tov, for me it's Yom Tov. So similar, that's a comparison to it. For me it's Shabbos, I was on Kabbalah Shabbos. him it's not Shabbos at all. So it's different than a Mir La'akum that I can't tell if it's for Shabbos for me, it's not Shabbos for him. There's a new Gzera of Mir La'akum, but there was never a Gzera of a Mir Yisrael. So if for him it's not Shabbos, for me it is, I can ask him to do Malachim. That's Halachim Beis Hamikdash Gimel. So his Rebbe wants to say that just like you can do that before Shabbos, he says, Hu Adin Motzei Shabbos. If I'm continuing Shabbos and he's not, he already said Havdalah, I could also tell him, I can ask him to do Malacha and I can be named from that. So the Levush says, you can't compare the two. You can't compare Shabbos coming in to Shabbos going out. By Shabbos coming in, by Makabel Shabbos, it's totally been nidroi in your neder, in your Kabbalah, the way you're Makabel on yourself Kedusha Shabbos. Just like any neder, I can be Makabel some things and other things not. So I could be Makabel on myself not to do Malacha, but I wasn't Makabel on myself that he shouldn't do Malacha or that I shouldn't ask him to do Malacha. Mechatesi that I was Makabel that. So since Kabbalah Shabbos is totally like a Kabbalah's neder, therefore it's totally in what my das is. Fuke Shabbos, so when Shabbos goes out, Shekfar Nesar Allah Hakol Yom Shabbos, everything was already Nesar Allah when Shabbos, during the whole day of Shabbos. Who mamshich dushas v'layla. Now it's not my decision what I'm mamshich at this point. I'm just mamshich whatever was on Shabbos. I'm mamshich further. So just like I can't ask somebody else to do malacha for me on Shabbos, also Motzei Shabbos, I can't ask someone else to do malacha for me. That's the discussion. He goes on further. I'm not going to go with the whole thing inside now. So this lesson of the Levush is, very, very revealing. The whole different shot in Kabbalah Shabbos, that it's not a din in Hamshachas Shabbos, Kedusha Shabbos. Rather, it's a din in Kabbalah. It's a Kabbalah's neder. It's you're Makabel on yourself like a neder dinei Shabbos, Yisuri Shabbos, and it could be that that's what the Torah was machayev you when the Torah was machadish the din of Tosefes Shabbos. The Torah was machayev you to Makabel on yourself dinei Yisuri Shabbos. It never said anything about extending Kedusha Shabbos. Rather, it's telling you to Makabel on yourself dinei Shabbos.
Well, what says the lashon of Kedusha Shabbos?
Sorry.
The lashon of the Levush is Hadavar Tali Benidro V'Kibul Olav Kedusha Shabbos.
Yeah, I'm Makabel on myself. In other words, the din, the Kedusha Klape, the Yisurim. But in other words, here's where like we'll say the rubber meets the road. The nafkamin will be that if it was really Kedusha Shabbos kuloi, in other words, it depends how I'm Makabel on myself Kedusha Shabbos. So but it's something I'm Makabel on myself. If it would be regular Kedusha Shabbos, when I'm a Kabbalah, then it's just chal on me Kedusha Shabbos. It's not up to me to decide what's chal or what's not chal. I was just Makabel it, and then it's on me. That's it. The Kedusha Shabbos is there. The full din tishbos is there. So it's not up to me what I want to do. It would be similar to Motzei Shabbos. He himself agrees to. Only if you hold that there is a din Kabbalah and it's a din on the Gavra, is a shak to say there's chalukim between how you're makabel or not makabel. Because if it's the full real chefs of Shabbos there, even klapi dasei, it's not up to me anymore.
Would does this mean that there would need to be some type of verbalization, or if it's really on the person of making a neder, if it's in that camp, wouldn't that require some type of verbalizing it or something of the sort?
Yeah, and the post will say that when you say, like you have to, you're in a you would have to verbalize it in some way. It's a very interesting question that there's a ritva in Rosh Hashanah. I'm not sure. It's only I don't know if there's two different girsos of the ritva there. It's not in the new brown ritvas in the Mosar Cook in the old sets of ritva in Rosh Hashanah Naftes. So there he speaks out that let me find the lashon. He said, I wrote it down. It says, "Kevin shahosid davar hanikar sheyeshbo mishum kedusha v'tasefes זה אין בדברים הביטול מלאכה בלבד, אלא שיוסיפנו בדברים של קדושה או בתפילה או בקידוש. In other words, he comes to Lafuke, you might think that it's enough to say, I'm calling on myself Isuri Shabbos. You don't say with that. So the Ritva says, no, that's not enough. You need to do something that's most of Kedusha, like Kiddush or Tfilas Shabbos or something like that. Like we say, when you say Mizmor Shir Liyam Shabbos, it's Chal on you, Dinei Shabbos. So the Ritva goes out of his way to say that it's not enough. Don't think you can say, according to Levush, should be enough to say, I'm calling on myself, I'll call you Isuri Shabbos. And that would be the nidroi, or that would be your kavana when you say that. That's the way it works according to him. Even when you say Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos, all the uichal will be Isuri Shabbos as like a netter on yourself.
That would be you probably have more kavana if you would say it as opposed to just davening, because sometimes you're just davening the words. You're having in mind to just pure shamilim. You're not thinking about anything else. So I would think maybe the other way even.
All right. So maybe that's why we're learning this. I'll just let you know. Like when I say Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos, I have kavana to do Kabbalah on myself, Kabbalah Shabbos. So it could be mostly Nechal Kodesh. And if I know we're davening late and that's going to be after Shkia, then I say Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos before we start davening. So it can be mostly something Al Kodesh. It's just a good anhaga to get that mitzvah. Otherwise, it's a shame you could blow that mitzvah. It's a fascinating ritva, but it's very telling also. The ritva is telling us that to be Kabbalah Shabbos means you have to be moshech on yourself, Kedusha Shabbos. You have to do something that connects to Kedusha Shabbos, not enough to say you're parish from Malacha at that point. So that ritva fits into the sad that what you're doing is you're being moshech. You're stretching the Kedusha Shabbos. That's why the Ofen Kabbalah Shabbos needs to be through some Davrish of Kedusha, either in Masker, B'Tfilah, or B'Kiddush, or in that way. So, I think a very Geshmaka Nafkamina, there's a Sefer Emek Bracha, one of the Talmidim of the Brisker Rav and the Chazon Ish, very, very well-known Lamdish Sefer, and then a Orach Chaim. So he has a suffix. If a person is makabel on themselves, mixtas malachas, would that work or not? I'm makabel on myself Shabbos for only some malachas, yes, some malachas not. I'm makabel on myself not to do borer and whatever, but I'm still going to do okay, it's not going to be batish. Would it work to be makabel on yourself that?
It might work, but you don't fulfill the mitzvah of being Tosefah Shabbos, because Tosefah Shabbos is all of Shabbos, not certain malachos and not others. Maybe I don't know for sure if it will work, but you for sure will work makabel Tosefah Shabbos.
So okay, yeah, interesting. So he speaks it through. Based on what we're saying, so you're right. In economy, it would be. Is it shy to have a partial Kabbalah or not? Like the Vush says that my Kabbalah works for myself, but not legabe certain things like Amir Israel. I could still ask someone to do something, even though I can't do that on Shabbos itself. So it comes out that every Kabbalah is really, in a way, not a full Kabbalah. Like I'm Kabbalah myself, but not legabe somebody else. So could I also do it? So the Chorah is telling you these two studim. Could I possibly do that or not? So and our Hakira, he wants to say something similar to that. He says. The way he says it is that he's medayik from our Tosas. He's a Geshmaka Diak. Listen to this. That from our Tosas, he's medayik. That Tosas says that really he has a question that why manishtana halayla hazeh matzah from every other night, every other Yom Tov Shabbos you could be eat the Suda early. Because Tosas himself wants to eat the Suda mamish early. Why should matzah be any different? Matzah l'chor also should be. So the answer is because there's a special drasha you need Laila Mamish. That's Hukash, Hekesh Matzah, and Korban Pesach, right? But Tosas Svora Chitzona, though, without a special drasha, Tosas held that you could already eat matzah by Tosefes Yom Tov. You're Mosif, and now you can already eat matzah. So if it's just a Kabbalah Isser Malacha, how can you possibly eat matzah? You have to eat matzah on Pesach. It has to be Pesach to eat matzah. You can't just have an Isser Malacha Pesach and eat matzah Miyotzeh. It's a pasha. I need to eat matzah when it's Pesach. So So how could Tos have a havamina? You could eat that. If not for a special drasha, you need a Laila Mamish. Otherwise, no, I could have eaten it by Tosefos, just like Suda Shabbos. You see clearly, Tosfos held that the Tosefos is a Tosefos kedusha. I'm continuing the kedusha of Shabbos and Yom Tov, and therefore I could even eat matzah if not for the special drasha. So according to that, it's clear that you couldn't be makabel part yes and part not, because once you're makabel the kedusha is kol everything. Masha Enken, he says that the Magen of Rum, he brings the Magen of Rum that brings the Sefer Haredim. You can't not be Yotzei Suda Shabbos every week, not like Tosfos. Everyone holds that every week Suda Shabbos needs to be at night mamish. So he wants to say that the swore of that must be that it's really a Kabbalah's Isser Malacha, not a Hemshech of Kedusha Shabbos. That's why it can't be Yotzei Suda Shabbos. So according to that, he says it's hard to say maybe you could be Makabal Mixas Malachos. So according to what we're saying, it's Pashat, it's Mustaber like that, Midin Neder, whether you're Makabal like you said, like you just said, whether you're Mamish Mekayim the Mitzvah, I could hear that maybe you're not. I mean, because if you're not, how are you really Mekayim the Mitzvah to Sev Shabbos if I can still do Makab Patish, even though I can't do Bora? So, but that Kabbalah Shabbos somehow could work maybe partially. Now, what's very now, if you take a look at this now, it's very interesting, right, fascinating that the Magen Avram quotes that Sefer Haredim. You can't be Yotzei the Suda Shabbos B'Layla, except B'Layla. And Magen Avram says maybe you could, but could I be Machmir? The Taz in the end of Reis Tzadik Test is Cholak completely. Of course you could. They quote Sosos in the Rush. Of course you could eat Suda Shabbos. What's Gudas Machlokas? So it comes out, I think, really that the Taz and the Marshal that holds like Sefer Haredim and the Magen Avram all go l'shitasam. Each one is they're being consistent because we brought down to look at the Taz in the end of Hilchos Lulav, very very last page of Hilchos Lulav. He brings down the Marshal that held that the last day of Sukkot, one should not be makabel early Shmini Atzeres. We all saw that there. Let's say we'll make it simple. Make it you're in Eretz Yisrael. You're an Israeli, and you only have one day of Yom Tov, so once it get complicated, and you were makabel on yourself. So the Marshal holds you should not be makabel on yourself the kedusha Shmini Atzeres, because if you want to eat something, you're not going to be able to eat, because to eat, once you're makabel Shmini Atzeres, you can't make a bracha anymore. But you're still chayav in sukkah, even though you're makabel Shmini Atzeres, it's still daytime. You're makabel early, so you're really betzim. You're still mechuyev in sukkah. So, but you can't make a bracha, and to eat without a bracha, he said he holds that's an avera. So therefore, if you are makabel early, you can't eat anything until mamish laila. So you have a period of time. It could be an hour and a half, whatever the whole period of Tosefos. You're not going to be able to eat a suda even though you're hungry because of that problem of the bracha. So the Taz is very very strongly cholak on him. It says over there, talking to Dvarav, he says, "Bemes svar sheban harab alav hu eno kiyum klal. Bevadai misha mosif michol ala kodesh. For sure, anyone who's mosif michol ala kodesh ha'osa al pitzivit torasenu, you're being makayim the mitzvah Torah to be mosif michol ala kodesh. For chalaf v'halach amenu chovas hayon, mashahaya alav kodem zeh. So if you're makayim that tzivya Torah, for sure the Torah meant to say that the kedusha that was there before is gone, and now you're makabel yourself a new kedusha. So the old kedusha has left, and now you're makabel yourself the new kedusha of the coming day. V'hava kamo balayla, a machar mamish. It's as if it's mamish tomorrow. It's as if you put yourself into the night of the next day. That's what the Taz says. So it comes out very geschmack. The Taz is the Nekudas Machlokes between the Taz and the Marshal. The Marshal is holding like the Levush, that the whole Indian of Kabbalah Shabbos and Yom Tov is it's a din on the Gavra, like a Makabel, like a Kabbalah's neder, Makabel on yourself the Isurim, but the day is still there. It's still day. And so for that reason, the Marshal holds, and that's the Magen Avraham, the Sefer Charedim, and the Marshal is in that camp, that you can't be Yotzei Sudas Shabbos yet. You have Isur Malacha on yourself, but you can't be Yotzei Sudas Shabbos until the night. But the Taz, the Shitasa, the Taz holds a bunch of Makabel on yourself Kedusha Shabbos, and then it's Mamish, it's your Moshech, the Kedusha onto yourself. It becomes like the next day Mamish. You have the full Kedusha the next day, and therefore the Taz, the Shitasa holds in Reish Tzadik Aleph that you are for sure Yotzei Sudas Shabbos as well. And so based on that, that's why Tosas by us had a Havamina that you could even be Yotzei Matzah once you're Makabel on yourself Tosefes Yom Tov of Pesach. If not for a special drasha that you need Mamish Laila, then Tosas held that you already have the Kedusha of Shabbos on you. But the Rebbeinu Yehuda is not Pashut. He says maybe you're not going to be Yotzei, and we have to be. The reason we taught to tell us Pesach, we might have thought that it's like Korban Pesach, there's man shchita you can eat, but maybe you cannot be Yotzei Sudas Shabbos until the night. So we see that this machlokas of Shoner is really what we're talking about. This machlokas between the Taz and the Marshal, between the Sefer Charedim and the Magen Avraham and the Taz, and all the way through we find these two mahalchim going through all these halachas, many different places, whether Kabbalah Shabbos is a din on the Gavra, Makabi Isurim, or it's a Hamshacha, it's a continuation of Kedusha Shabbos.
How do we understand, like, according to that mahalach, that the Taz holds like Kabbalah's neder? So why would you be allowed to have a neder, like, if it's like an option, and why would you take away from Sukkot?
Sorry, you're going out.
Why should we be allowed to do that then? If it's just a Kabbalah's neder, then like misvara, I will just have a hard time understanding that you're taking away from the kedusha of Sukkot and making it Tniatzeres. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
The fact that you can make a neder to take away from one yontif, one kedusha, and make a different kedusha. Like if I guess the way the Maharshal says that there's kedusha is kind of malleable because that's what Hashem told us we could do. So we can change the kedusha, but like here you're changing from one to the other. Why do you have the right to do that then? Is it just because we have to accept there's a mitzvah of Tosefes? It works.
Yeah, there's a mitzvah of Tosefes, but the Marshal agrees there's a mitzvah of Tosefes. He just says that from that point on you can't eat anymore because it's a catch-22. You're sort of stuck.
Right, but I'm saying I don't understand it in the Taz, like that we can do that. Like, how does that work, misvara? Like, I'm deciding that it's no longer Sukkot.
He says that's what he says. That's what the Torah itself told us to do. The Torah is megala to us to end that kedusha before, and mekabel on yourself a new kedusha. I couldn't have thought that myself. That's gufa nichlal in the tzivui Torah. That's
what I was saying. That's how Tosefes works. Is that I guess it also works with the fact that we have the power over the Zman. Like what Ravi said before, like Shabbos, we don't have that ability. Would it work with Shabbos?
Well, that sort of depends. Like in the Hanami, we're going to say that if you hold that you're Moshech, the Kedusha Shabbos, like many Rishonim are holding now, and it's Chal and Kedusha Shabbos, like it's Chal Kedusha Yom Tov, then the Taz is holding the same thing by eating Suda Shabbos as well, right? Because you can eat the Suda Shabbos, it's considered already Shabbos.
But you couldn't take, according to the Taz, I would think you can't take away from Shabbos then. Meaning, if let's say Shabbos, the last day of Sukkot, when you're going into Shmini Atzeres, does the Taz hold different? Yeah. Meaning you can't, what?
No, so the din is to be mostly Michol al Kodesh, not Mikodesh al Kodesh. So the only reason it works by Sukkot is because Chol HaMoed Klapa Yom Tov is It's not really, yeah, there's a chi of sukkah, but it's not. Now it's interesting that there's another taz that in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah in Simon Tafresh that there the shaila is if you didn't have a shofar for 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, and after the second day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, so everybody's in Kabbalah Shabbos early, and because they didn't think they're going to have a shofar, and suddenly a shofar shows up, or even if they knew about it was coming, but they wanted to be Kabbalah Shabbos early. So there, the Taz says that that the Kabbalah is not chal, and you can still be to have a shofar. So the Chor's a steer on the Taz, because you're being mosif now a higher level of kedusha. It's Yom Tov Sheni, Rosh Hashanah, Drabanan. You're adding Shabbos on. He says it's not chal the Kabbalah. You can still against the shofar. So the Taz himself actually asked the stira. He says, even though I wrote in Hilchos Shmini Atzeres, you could do, and it is chal. That's because over there you weren't really mechuyev to sit in the sukkah at all. You're not mechuyev to eat anything. So there's no standing chiyuv, because like you can't make a shvu on a mitzvah, because our nishbu harsina, I think Warren Shua says you already have a shvu on you to keep what the Torah says. I'm not mechuyev to eat anything in the sukkah now at all. If I'm a kabbalah myself, it says it works. My shekin shofar, I'm mechuyev to hear a shofar. So if my Kabbalah is going to come in place of hearing the shofar, my Kabbalah is not going to be chal, in place of something I'm already mechuyev to do. So see that even according to the Taz that it's continuing the kedusha, it starts with the Kabbalah. Everyone agrees that it starts with the Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah has to be chal. There is an aspect of Kabbalah, even according to the Taz, that's totally in your Kabbalah. Like the Gemara in Brachos talks about, if you made a Kabbalah of a toast, he thought it was already nighttime. The Hawk Kehila thought it was nighttime, but it was really just cloudy. With Yom HaMunah, it was cloudy, and they made a mistake. So it says it was a Kabbalah of a toast, it's not chal. So it has certain dinim like a netter. Everyone agrees it has certain. It starts off like a netter. The question is, once you make that netter, does it just stay a netter and just stay with like a netter on the Gavra? Or once you make that netter, then the Torah kicks in and stretches out the Kedusha, because you're kind that din of Torah to Nosed and follow the Kodesh. So in a case where you make your netter and it's going to be soser another mitzvah, the Taz says, then your netter is never chal to begin with. It's like a nidre toast. It's not going to be ever chal. That's an interesting point that comes out from the Taz. And one last nakuda, it's just to point out that there's many other things to talk about over here, but
Maybe can I ask a question on what we just said?
yes.
The Tosefet Shabbos, according to the first Shita in Tosfos, and those Rishonim that it say that it's like Marich, the Etzem Yom of Shabbos, would that also work? Would they hold that works even when it's going to result in a kula? Like, let's say if you have Yom Tov on Friday and you want to accept Shabbos early, but there are certain things on Yom Tov that are more chamor than Shabbos, like by Din Muktzah and stuff like that. Would you be able to be Mekel like the Hilchos Shabbos, even though the day is technically Yom Tov, but now because they're holding that you're stretching the day of Shabbos, it's like mamash not Yom Tov anymore, and now I could do something that on Yom Tov would be asur, even though because now on Shabbos it would be mutter?
It sounds like it's a good question. It sounds like from the Taz, yes, because the Taz is saying that you're putter from the Shiva Sukkah. You could eat without a sukkah.
But the Taz, doesn't he go like those that say that it's a neder?
No. On the contrary, he's for carrot. He's the spitz of saying that it's a real chalos kedusha. He says that for halach halaflo, the previous kedusha of, let's say, Chol Moed Sukkos is gone, and now it's for you. It's Shmini Atzeres. He says mamish opposite. He says that's the Magen Avram, and is more mashma. He holds like Rabbi Kiva. Magen Avram is machmer for sudas. I mean, for like the levush. Magen Avram is one that is machmer legabi eating sudas Shabbos. You shouldn't eat it before, or at least you should eat it kazayas at night. Rabbi Kiva in a few places on the Magen Avram cites this levush. So mashma he holds with the Magen Avram, and Rabbi Kiva himself goes with the levush.
So that sheet are really mamash, like it's Shabbos in all ways. Lechumra or lekula.
Yes, that's what it sounds like from the Taz. Yeah. I'm just going to throw out a morsel, but I'm not going to explain it at all. That anybody that wants to go more into this, if you look in that sugya Rosh Hashanah, Sefer Shabbos, you look in the Gillian of Shas Rabbi Kreger, and he has two huge kashas there. He remains Tzarchi and Gadol. So, based on the fact that we just said that Rabbi Kreger holds like the Levush, so you can. I'm not going to explain this at all. I'll just tell you, Mara Mokum, that you can look at that Rabbi Kreger that his kashas that he asks are only shver in his own shita, like the Levush, but they wouldn't be shver if you hold like the other shita. So that was just a parenthetical Mara Mokum for anybody who wants to go into it. We can talk more about it if anybody goes into it. Just to end off with
Let
one
me
last.
just skip the lineup again because I got confused. I thought Rabbi said that the Levush was the Taz, and the Marshal and the Magen Avram and Rabbi Kiva Eger were the other side of Kedusha Shabbos.
The Marshal, the Levush is the one who says neder.
And that's not the Taz?
No, the Taz holds the other side. The Taz is the Taz brings the Marshal, but it's cholik on him. The Taz is the one that's strongly cholik on the Marshal. The Marshal brought by the Taz, yes, but the Taz himself is the one who said that it's kvar halach halaf lo. The kedusha is gone. It's new kedusha. It's like Lila. It's mamish like the kedusha the next day. That's the Taz over there, and that's why the Taz we're saying the Shitaso holds that you can be Yotzei Suda Shabbos also. It's Pasha you can be Yotzei Suda Shabbos and by Tosefus. It's the Taz in Tafresh Samaches and the Taz in end of Tafresh Tzaddik. I'm sorry, tough kuf tzaddik. Tough, not tough. In Reish tzaddik. Sorry, Reish tzaddik. Okay. So now, which is one last nafkamina I just wanted to throw out. And again, there's more to talk about here, but we can't do the whole shots at one time. But there's a fascinating shaila in Yoredea in Hilchos Nida. And Kuf Tzadik, in the beginning of Kuf Tzadik Vav, the Ramah there brings 2 days if a woman didn't do Hefsek Tara yet, as far as I'm Nakim, and she was Makabel Shabbos, like they said Baruch Hu, and she was Makabel Shabbos. So the first shita of the Ramah, it brings one shita that you can no longer do a Hefsek Tara. Hefsek Tara has to be Biyom. And once you said Baruch Hu and Makabel Shabbos, then you can no longer do a Hefsek Tara. The second sheet of the Ramah is that you still could do it. Even though you said Baruch Hu in Kabbalah Shabbos, you could still do Hefsek Tara. So the Gra over there brings a few rayas to the second sheet of the Ramah. By him, it's pasha that you for sure could do Hefsek Tara. One of his rayas is from a Tosfos and Ksuvis that you can look into. He brings that. This is Kuf Tzadik Vav in the beginning of Kuf Tzadik Vav. So the Gra there brings down a Tosfos and Mem Zayin and Ksuvis that if you're it talks there about you can't get married on Chol HaMoed, and there's a question of Maisi Adayim of a woman. If you do it during Yom Tov, how could it be? You can't get married during Yom Tov. So it's Tosfos over there says that you married her, but Bisman Tosefes Yom Tov. So it's and mitzad achad it's Yom Tov, mitzad sheni there's no isser of marv simcha b'simcha of getting married at that time. So the Gra says that so it brings that as a raya that you could also still do Hefsek Tara. Very fascinating raya from the Gra. So, but at first glance, it would seem that this is again totally in our Hakira and the two studim over here. Do you say that it's just a din? Isser Malacha, whatever, you Makabel Shabbos on yourself, and it's only a din of the Gavra. So you say, look, this I'm Makabel, this I'm not Makabel. Just like I could tell someone to do Malacha, I could also still do Hefsek Tara. It's not really Lila, it's not really Shabbos, it's just the day, so I could do Hefsek Tara. And if you hold that you can't do it, the first sheet of the Ramah is holding that it's Mamash Kabbalah Gemara. That it's a Tosefos of the Shabbos itself, like you could use the words of the Taz, Kalayla Mamash. That would be at first glance, it would seem. But if you make the cheshbon and the shitas doesn't really work out, doesn't work out so well as far as the cheshbon, that even those, it seems that even those who hold like the Taz, the Taz himself as well, still hold you could do hefsek tara. So what I think you have to say, and this is, I'm just going to sort of open up a window over here, but it needs further discussion. I think what the direction is going to be is that even if you hold that Kabbalah, the Kabbalah Shabbos makes it like it's Yom, like the day itself, like there's a Hamshachas Kedusha. It's only going to be klape those dinim that are defined by that Kedusha itself. That those dinim which arise as a result of that Kedusha, and they stem from that Kedusha. So for that, you could say perhaps that it's considered like the Kedusha is already there, the Gabi, those dinim, such as making Kiddush, eating the Suda, all the things that arise due to that Kedusha, and they're part and parcel of that Kedusha, that you could, that's a tzad to say that it's considered like the Yom Tov is already there, and the Gabi, those dinim. The Gabi, other ancillary or incidental dinim that have nothing to do with it happen to just arise, and there might be a steer at the Yom Tov, but they're not part and parcel with the fact that you're Kabbalah Shabbos, such as the Kabbalah Shabbos has nothing to do with doing a bdika of hefsek tara for a woman. So now you happen to have a snagshus. You happen to have a clash going on over here between the fact that you're Kabbalah Shabbos on one hand, and now you have this whole separate din. There's nothing to do with Kedusha Shabbos. Just that if it's tomorrow, it's too late. But it's not. There's no steer between Shabbos and doing hefsek tara. There's no. It's a totally side din. So something that's not as a result of Kedusha Shabbos. So for that, Kabbalah Shabbos does not mashpia. I think that's going to be the shot in the Gra, and that's why he's bringing Uriah from, for example, the din of Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha to the issue of Mekadosh and Isha on Chol HaMoed. That's not going to apply during Zman Tosefes Shabbos or Tosefes Yom Tov. I mean, because Mekadosh and Isha. So again, Mekadosh. So I can't be Mekadosh on Yom Tov, but it's a side din. It's not a din that's nevea mitoch the kedusha of Yom Tov. It's just I can't do something. It's going to be soser kedusha Shabbos Yom Tov. So the guy side din and the guy extra din that are not part and parcel with that. The guy with that we're going to say that it's not going to be chal. I think that'll be the issue of the answer to the.
Because the hefsek tara is just a zman issue.
Sorry.
The hefsek tara is just a zman issue. Is that what Rabbi's saying? Like,
right. It's not a kedusha issue, right?
So it's als kedusha, the zman is different, but als zman itself, it's not different for the hefsek.
Right. Okay. Gabi hefsek. It's still the day. It's still Erev. It's still Friday day. Gabi the din that it needs to be Friday day to do the hefsek tara.
Is there an actual isser? What's the isser of being Mekadosh and Isha on Shabbos? Doing like a kinyan? Is it because then why would that help? That doesn't seem like something is not separate from Shabbos if it's usser. If it's usser, it's usser. Then you can't make a chiluk. Would you be able to?
Well, there it's talking about the Graz saying that the Tosha says that the Gabi the din of Ein Marbin Simcha B'Simcha.
Okay, so that's obviously one issue. But what about being Mekadosh and Isha on Shabbos? Are we saying?
Yes, so we'll figure out some way you can Mekadosh Rebbe Bia, let's say, whatever you do it.
Okay.
We'll do
Is
it
this
without
what we're learning about, like Sphira on Pesach?
Sorry?
Is this like similar to what we saw? I think it was in the Taz that he brings down, like that you could do Sphira on Pesach and Chutz La'aretz. Even like we're doing Sphira there, we're doing like it's almost like a Tarte de Sasre, even though because we're on the one hand we're saying that we're doing Kiddush in Chutz La'aretz, saying that this is the first day of Pesach, and on the other hand we're counting Sphira. But he said because it's not intrinsic to the Kiddush, it's not tied to the Kiddush, so the two are not considered like a Tarte de Sasre. We're saying similar here with Shabbos, that it's only something that's going to contradict our acceptance of Shabbos, but legabe other mitzvos, there's no shaychus to our Kabbalah.
There actually, we did say there really is a problem, because by being Sofer Sfiras Omer, by definition, you're saying that it's not the first day of Pesach. So if the din of Yom Tov Sheni is to say, as if we're not sure, and today's the first day of Pesach, the second day is the first day, then that taka is a stira. The only reason we do it, because since we're Bekiyim Bekviyah Diarcha, we do know Midaraisa when it really is. and Sphira is so to we'll say Sphira Be'etzim is a mitzvah deraisa. There's a shalom bisman hazeh, but Be'etzim is a mitzvah deraisa. So we're not going to be the sake of the Yoma of the second day is not enough to be docha the kedusha deraisa, the mitzvah deraisa of Sfiras Omer. But their taka would have been the stira because when I stand and I suffer, I do Sfiras Omer, that is saying today is not the first day of Yom Tov. So that there it actually is a stira, as opposed to say Hefsek Tara, it's just the whole side, it's a side thing completely. That's why we had to say different tears over there.
Okay.
Very good though. Okay. Shkoch everybody. Geschmack. And have a great Shabbos. I'm waiting to get slugged up, so I'll be happy to take.
Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rebbe. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
We
Good Shabbos.
reach out directly if we have pashas, or
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll be able to answer as quickly as possible, which is not always that quickly, but I'll try my best.
Shkoyach, good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Shabbos.